TESS stands for Texas Teacher Evaluation and Support System. We have 3 objectives that we're going to cover during this training. The first is that teachers will become familiar with the TESS process. The second is we want you to become familiar with the TESS rubric and understand how it applies to your roles and responsibilities as a classroom teacher. And third, we want you to understand that the TESS process is based on best practices and an ongoing system of feedback and support. TESS has a timeline that is set by the Texas Education Code. On the left side of the timeline, you can see that teacher orientation must occur no later than the first 3 weeks of school. All teachers who are new to the district or teachers who have never been evaluated using TESS must participate in this orientation. Also on the left-hand side, you see goal setting and professional development plan. This is one of the 3 big pieces of TESS that we'll review in more detail later. However, all teachers develop this plan at the beginning of each year. And as a new teacher, you will also participate in a goal setting and professional development conference with your appraiser. This is an added level of support for you, as your appraiser will help walk you through the process of developing your plan. At the bottom of the timeline, you'll see that informal observations and walkthroughs occur at any time during the school year. The formal observation, which we'll talk more about later, would be scheduled with your appraiser ahead of time. Finally, on the right side of the timeline, you will see end of the year conferences. We'll go over this in more detail later as well, but this is an opportunity for the teacher to meet with their appraiser to review progress on the goal setting and professional development plan. So to summarize this timeline, we have the 3 main parts of TESS: the goal setting and professional development plan, which I will refer to as the GSPD plan, the formal observation, and the end of the year conferences. We will now look at each one of these in more detail, starting with the GSPD plan. The GSDB plan consists of 3 parts: the self-assessment, which you should complete prior to meeting with your appraiser, professional goals, and the student learning objective. The professional goal is a goal that you set for yourself. So for example, if you are an alternative certification teacher, you may want to consider a professional goal of earning your intern certificate by March 1st. But that's really just one example of many, and it's really something that should speak to you and be meaningful for you. The student learning objective is a goal that you set for your students. For example, 90% of my students will master 2-digit by 2-digit multiplication. As a former principal, I always encourage my teachers to create their student learning objective so that it aligned with a goal that the campus had. That way, if every teacher was successful in meeting their student learning objective goal, the campus would also meet theirs. Although this may all sound a little daunting right now, remember that you will be meeting with your appraiser in the GSPD conference. And in this conference, your appraiser will be there to guide and to help you. It's also an opportunity for both the teacher and the appraiser to be clear about the goals, as well as the subsequent actions to reach the desired outcome. In addition, you get to let your appraiser know what kinds of support systems you need in order to achieve your goals. When you develop your professional and student learning goal, your appraiser will want to make sure that they are SMART goals. SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So your goal should not be broad-based. It should be very targeted. It should be something that can be measured. Otherwise, we would not know whether the goal was met. It should be something that's definitely achievable. It needs to be relevant to the students and to the instruction and to the curriculum. And it also needs to be time-bound, which means it needs to have a beginning and an end date. The second big piece to TESS is the formal observation. In VISD, all formal observations are scheduled in advance. Typically, your appraiser will just get with you and will come up with a date and time that works best for both of you. An observation must be a minimum of 45 minutes. As a former principal, though, I would stay until the end of the lesson, even if it lasted beyond 45 minutes. The great thing about the formal observation is that it's not a gotcha. Your appraiser wants you to be successful. And to help ensure you're successful, he or she will meet with you within 10 days prior to the observation. And there will also be a post-conference to reflect and discuss areas of reinforcement and refinement. The pre-conference has three main purposes. First, to provide the teacher with an opportunity to share his or her thought process in developing the lesson plan and to provide additional details about the upcoming observation. Second, to clarify expectations for teachers and student performance. And third, to provide the appraiser with information about the lesson observation and the criteria that may not be directly observable. Typical questions that your appraiser may ask, for example, are what objectives will be addressed in the lesson? Are there any particular grouping structures in place? If so, how will you hold students accountable for group work? How will you assess whether or not students met the objectives for the lesson? These are just a few examples of questions that your appraiser may ask that is designed to promote conversation to help ensure that you will be successful and that your students will master the lesson. There are certain elements to the lesson that your appraiser will be looking for. Some of these elements are rigorous and measurable goals aligned to state content standards, student engagement and interaction, alignment of activities and materials throughout the lesson, student relevancy, the teacher displaying content knowledge, numerous checks for mastery, the teacher asking probing questions to extend student learning, evidence of student mastery of the objective, and differentiation. So TESS has taken these elements and many more and has created a rubric. The rubric was created by a steering committee comprised of Texas educators such as yourself and based on best practices and requirements of the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. This graphic gives you an overview of the TESS rubric. There are 4 domains: planning, instruction, learning environment, and professional practices and responsibilities. While the appraiser will observe the first 3 during walkthroughs and observations, the teacher will have an opportunity to provide supporting data for the last domain at the end of the year conference. In our next slide, we will look at Domain 2, instruction, in greater detail. In this slide, you can see that Domain 2, instruction, has 5 dimensions: achieving expectations, content knowledge, communication, differentiation, and monitor and adjust. Each one is defined. On our next slide, we'll take a closer look at just one of these dimensions: differentiation, dimension 2.4. Here is where you get your first real look at the TESS rubric. This slide covers only one dimension of one domain, but it breaks it into 5 different performance levels: distinguished, accomplished, proficient, developing, and needs improvement. When an appraiser thinks about the lesson he or she observed, they will typically look at the descriptors under the proficient performance level first, and then go either up or down depending on what they observed. The third bullet down illustrates the difference between the performance levels. So under performance, the third bullet states, provides differentiated instructional methods and content to ensure students have the opportunity to master what is being taught. Directly to the left, under accomplish, you find the same wording, except it adds that the teacher regularly provides this. And under distinguished, the teacher always provides this. Now going back to proficient, and then going to the right under developing, you can see the word changes to sometimes, and then under improvement needed, it changes to rarely. We will now quickly review the rubric again to summarize what we have learned using the example of differentiation dimension 2.4. Instruction is a domain. Differentiation is the dimension. The bullets contain the descriptors. And then we have our 5 performance levels. Here's the overview of all 4 domains, and you can again see all 4: planning, instruction, learning environment, and professional practices and responsibilities. You can also see the dimension of differentiation under the instruction domain, which we used in our example in the past few slides. So again, the rubric helps you to know what best practices look like, and it helps the appraiser in their evaluation. Within 10 days after your formal observation, you will meet with your appraiser in a post-conference. There are 4 key elements of the post-conference. The first element, the introduction, is where the appraiser will ask a general impression question about the lesson. For example, he or she might say, "What are your thoughts on the observation? How do you think it went? How do you feel about it?" The second element is reinforcement. This is where the appraiser will ask you, what do you think went really well in the observation? What were you happy with? Then the appraiser will share his or her reinforcement, and oftentimes you come up with the same one, but sometimes it may be different. The third element is refinement. This is where the appraiser will ask you, is there anything that you wished had gone differently, or if you were to teach this lesson again, what might you do different? And you'll discuss that. The appraiser might share some thoughts there as well. And then finally, the appraiser will review the ratings with you. So we've now discussed 2 of the 3 main parts of TESS. The first one was goal setting and development plan, and the second was the formal observation, and the third is the end of the year conference. The end of the year conference does 4 things. It provides an opportunity for the teacher and the appraiser to summarize the year. Teachers should collect and bring information to the end of the year conference that will provide evidence to score domain 4. You should be prepared to discuss next year's goals and professional development plans. And know that domain 4 is not scored until after the end of the year conference. Here's domain 4. And under dimension 4.1 is professional demeanor and ethics. This is where you will have a conversation with your appraiser about attendance, professional appearance, decorum, and procedural, ethical, legal, and statutory responsibilities, and how you did in those areas. The second dimension is goal setting. You'll be reflecting on your practice here. You will bring the data that you've had from your professional goal and your student learning objective goal, and have a conversation about whether you met those goals. If so, how did you do that? If not, what do you think prevented you from meeting those goals? Dimension 4.3 is professional development. This is where you will share out the professional development opportunities that you had during the year and how you were able to utilize those in your classroom. And dimension 4.4 is school and community involvement. This is where you can share your leadership that you showed with students, colleagues, and community members. So we're almost to the end of this orientation. We've reviewed the 3 main parts of TESS. But before I let you go, I want to make sure that you have a few final thoughts. First off, hold yourself to a high standard for individual development and performance. Be sure to identify methods to collaborate with other educators professionally, both inside and outside of school. Engage in professional and targeted professional learning opportunities. Seek feedback and share insights and think about your pedagogy and instructional practices. If you'd like more information about TESS, you can visit the teachfortexas.org website. You can also rely on your instructional coach, your administrators, and returning team members. If you have any questions that they cannot answer, you are very welcome to call the TASER department, and we will be very, very happy to assist you. Thank you so much for participating in TESS orientation, and I wish you a very successful and happy school year.